Folks, we're back at it. Looks like we're being recorded. We got someone's watching. Let's see. I'm gonna figure out how to click this button. All right, there we go. All right, I'm seeing some people now. I've got the gallery mode up. Hey there. All right, so you guys, we're back at it. We're here for a new round of cooking with we're traveling the world, right? So we've been to a few different places since we started. We started in Italy, stuffed shells, and then we traversed the world to Jamaica last week. How did those things turn out? Thumbs up, thumbs down if you liked the Jamaican empanadas. What do you think? Thumbs ups. All right, all right. I'm seeing some positives and some mixed messages. Well, remember, with every recipe we make, you can totally change it however you want. That's the beauty of cooking, if you ask me. So, like when I make those Jamaican beef patties, like empanada type things, I put all sorts of different stuff in there. So it's not like you're stuck to whatever filling I told you to put in there. If you really love, and if you think that spaghetti is the best thing in the entire world, and you want to put that inside of an empanada, go for it. Do it. You could be the inventor of the spaghetti empanada. Who knows? So there's no rules here. So we were in Jamaica. Now we're not going super far from Jamaica, and we are going to have a little bit of a West Indian theme today because we are going to do Louisiana classic. We're going to do gumbo. Now gumbo is an absolutely fantastic, like almost a stew. It's not so much a soup. It's like a stew. Imagine a thick, sort of chunky, flavorful soup with all sorts of different, things in it. So what I think you guys are going to really enjoy making it. But what's really cool about gumbo, in my mind, is that there are a lot of different cooking techniques that we're going to learn as well. The same types of techniques that you would use to make lots of other delicious things, like a thick chicken noodle soup. You could use the roux that we're going to make to thicken up a really nice chicken noodle soup or something like that. So there's sauteing veggies. We're going to do some chopping. We're going to make a roux, which is a totally important thing in cooking. And then we're going to kind of play with some spices too. So it's going to be good times. I'm glad you're all here to rock out with a Louisiana style gumbo. And I'm going to give you a quick sneak peek at my secret ingredient that only I have, because I went out and climbed aboard a boat. All right, actually, I didn't use a boat. I went out, drove all the way to Idaho, and I got these little traps, and I walked way out alongside this lake. And I threw these big cage traps out into the lake, and then I waited a couple hours. And then I pulled the traps back in, and I pulled in some of these. Oh gosh. Okay, no wait, they're not alive anymore. Which is good, because they'd probably be snapping at me. This is a crawfish, also known as a crayfish, also known as a mud bug, also known as a high altitude mountain lobster, also known as I think there's a million names for these things, but crayfish, and they grow all around the world. And this one's from Idaho. It's actually an invasive species over there. And you can eat the tails, just like you can eat a lobster tail, or just like a shrimp tail too. They're about the size of a big shrimp. And you can eat the claws if they're big enough. You can see one claw is pretty small, and then the other one's pretty big. So you can eat the claws as well. Now these are hard to find. Like you guys, I didn't put this in the recipe because this is like almost impossible to find around here. But you can catch them in the rivers and lakes, mostly over in Idaho and other parts of Wyoming too. But this is a really traditional ingredient in Louisiana gumbo, because down in Louisiana, these things are in every ditch you might pass on the side of the road everywhere. People eat them all the time. I think they're delicious. They taste like shrimp and lobster combined. And I love both of those things. So when you combine them, it just makes my tongue want to explode. So anyways, I'm going to sneak these in there. But also, hopefully you guys, if you're doing a seafood version, you're going to use some shrimp. I've got some frozen Gulf shrimp here that we'll chuck in there. And that's like down in Louisiana and all around the Southeast in general, like shrimp are a major seafood ingredient. So shrimp is really classic. And the other thing we're going to put in here is some smoked sausage. So, all right, let's I'm gonna set you guys up here so we can start on our mission. I'm gonna try and not go over 6 o'clock today. No promises though. Okay, here we go.
Just a reminder, guys, you can check the chat box for instructions, and if you have just quick little questions, you can put them in there. And I think everyone changed their name today, but if you didn't, it's always helpful to have your name next to your video too. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's going to be helpful later too, because while we're stirring our roux, which takes forever, you're just stirring nonstop. I'm going to ask you guys to tell me a story, a short story about one of your favorite family recipes, like something that you love to eat. You don't have to make it, or you don't have to even know how to make it, but just think of something that, like, let's say it's your birthday and your parents are like, "What do you want for dinner?" You could say like, "Oh, this is my favorite thing," or you could say it's, some recipe that you've made with your family or that only your family makes and they make it the very best. So try and think of something. If you don't have anything, that's okay. But if you do, we'll ask you to tell us a bit about it while we're stirring our roux for like 15 minutes, which is the longest and slowest part of this class today, but also the most important for flavor building. Okay, that's enough talking on my end. I talk too much. So here we go.
We do have a
First
quick
up, we're gonna need.
question, Ian.
What's
Sorry.
that?
We do have a quick question.
Oh yeah.
Miles is wondering if you have frozen shrimp, should you take it out now, or is it okay frozen?
Yeah, it's, you can take it out now. It's all right if it stays frozen, but you can take it out now to start. If you're not going to use the whole thing, weigh out 1.5 pounds or a pound. You don't have to do the whole 1.5 pounds if you don't want. I have about 1 pound here, so, and I took it out a little bit earlier today, like maybe like an hour ago, and it's already thawing a little bit. But since I'm going to use the whole thing of shrimp, I don't mind. If you're not going to use the whole thing, take out what you're going to use and then put the rest back in the freezer. As I drip shrimp juice all over the kitchen. Classic. Okay, so first things we're going to need to make our roux, which is going to be the basis of this entire soup, is an oil. And I'm going to use peanut oil. You can use sunflower oil. You could use safflower oil. I don't even know the difference between those two. I often read them the same. I'm like, sunflower, safflower. I've never seen a safflower, though, and I've seen a lot of sunflower. So anyways, there's a bunch of different oil options. You could use butter as well. Olive oil would be totally fine. So any of those things are good. And then also we're going to need some flour. I keep my flour in this handy dandy little silver copper thing here. But we're going to need equal parts oil and flour. So keep those handy. And then other ingredients we're going to need today are red onions. Right here, straight out of the garden. Mine is a medium red onion, it says. So I'm going to use 2 of these little tiny ones that are from my garden because they're little ones. And then I have a shallot here too in case I want a little extra. Doesn't really matter. You can use any kind of onion you want as well. No need to exactly be red, but red is sort of traditional. Next up, bell peppers, red and green. I kind of went with Christmas theme for this gumbo. I don't know why. You could do orange as well, but any peppers will work. But you need to just have like a good chunk of them. So if you have any like tiny peppers, you could do like 3 or 4 of them. I'm going to do both of these sort of medium to large size peppers. So shabam, those are them. Next up, garlic. You know I love garlic. Everything we cook seems to have garlic in it. We're going to do garlic cookies next week, where you just basically smash up some garlic into little cookie shapes and bake them. They're delicious. No, we're not going to do that. I won't put garlic in our cookies. I promise you that, okay? But I do have garlic here, and I've got about 6 bulbs here. I'm not going to use all of them. My recipe here says, or cloves, it says 6 cloves. These are pretty big, so I'm probably going to do like 4. But your call. You guys know the drill with that already. As for next up on our seasoning, bay leaves. Now, these leaves, they look like you're just putting crispy autumn leaves in your soup. It's like, this is weird. But they have a really strong kind of like pine flavor. So I think they're really essential. And it calls for 3 of those leaves. But if you don't have them, you won't miss it. The soup will be delicious, but they add a little bit of like a unique flavor. So next up, andouille sausage. Now, I don't know if you guys are good at reading or not, but this is a strange word right here. Andouille. Andouille. But yeah, no, this actually is pronounced andouille, I think. And if I was super French, I'd say andouille, which I don't think is actually how they say it. But this speaks to how French this recipe is. And we're going to talk about that as we cook. But these are fully cooked already. If you have raw andouille sausage, then you'll have to cook it in the soup as well. Don't worry, we'll add it at the same time. Won't be any different. So you'll be able to keep up, no problem there. Next up, Cajun seasoning. Now, this is my own special Cajun seasoning because I made it and I wrote on top of a jar with a Sharpie. But any Cajun seasoning should work pretty well. So if it just says Cajun, that's, I don't know, there's lots of different types. But the main ingredient in my Cajun seasoning is smoked paprika. And so I've got a little list. You can do smoked paprika, salt, garlic powder, and black pepper and oregano. If you don't have Cajun seasoning, type it in there, and then we can sort of figure out how to have you make your own with whatever seasoning you've got. But having a mix is kind of nice. So Cajun seasoning there. The other super Cajun ingredient that's going to also be a spicy one. So if you guys are afraid of spice, tread lightly with this, but Tabasco. Super delicious in this application. So I'd say don't use none of it. If you're scared of spice, still use a little bit, but you don't have to use the full 2 tablespoons. And then you can always taste it at the end and be like, all right, we can add a little more spice if we want, so play it by ear. Now, next up is chicken broth. It's 4 cups of chicken broth. I've got this giant chicken broth thing here. So you guys can, make however you want to do it. We need 4 cups of chicken broth. So if that means mixing up 4 cups of water with this bouillon that we've used in the past, you should do that. If not, you've got just a jug of it. You can just dump out the 4 cups and be off to the races. And then for me, since I'm going super authentic Louisiana here in the mountains, I got this crayfish stock that I made from the crawfish that I caught that I'm going to use in mine. This is my stock here. So chicken stock, I'm just trying to tempt you guys to become crayfishermen. So that's why I keep promoting them. But yeah, so that's chicken broth. Also, we'll need a can of diced tomatoes, shebang, just like that. Anything will work. Diced tomatoes, you can have fire roasted. Just some tomato chunks in there are going to be good. And what else am I? Oh,
question, Ian.
Yeah.
Lachlan, you want to go ahead and let us know what your question is? I think you're on mute though.
Should I use more of the Cajun sauce? Because
hold on. We don't have the Cajun spice, but I did find Cajun sausage.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, if you don't have the spice, then yeah, you could use some more sausage. Plus, I feel like everyone would probably like sausage, so you can use
the sausage is Cajun style.
Nice, yeah. And are they links or is it chopped like ground?
No, it's links.
Links. Yeah, I'd say use that whole thing. And then if you have any smoked paprika in your cabinet, that's another good thing to add, as well as oregano, like a little bit of oregano. I think those are 2 real kind of unique spices that you can add. Just like a teaspoon of each, and then you can add more if you need.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the last ingredient on my list here is like required ingredients, which again, you don't have to use it, but this is okra. And okra is a really cool vegetable that I think it's actually considered a fruit. And it grows really well in the hot southern climates. And it's got this long kind of pointy, almost like a finger looking thing, like it's like a witch's finger, but it's pretty tasty. But what it really does is it gets kind of slimy. And slimy is not a word that like you want to hear when you're talking about food all that much. But when you cook these somewhat slimy vegetables into your soup, it actually thickens the soup. It makes it richer, so it sticks to the spoon better. And I think that okra is really traditional ingredient in gumbo. And a lot of people have made claims, and I'm not sure about this, but I've read this in a number of places, that the word for okra in West African is gumbo. And so, it's one of those such important ingredients. They used it to thicken up their soup and to add some flavor as well as a really nice texture to their gumbo. They just named the gumbo after the most important vegetable. Now, if you don't have any okra, it's okay. Things are still going to be good. We're making a roux that will thicken it as well. But if you do have okra, I want to tell you guys to use the whole thing, including the top. I got that as a little tip. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we only need 1/2 to 1 cup of okra. So I'm going to pull out like 6 of these whole ones. And if yours are already chopped up, you can just measure those out. And I'm going to let those soften up a little bit. We'll chop those up as we go through class. And then let's see, anything else that we need is I've got gumbo powder, filet gumbo powder, which I don't have. I couldn't find. So you guys probably don't have to use it. But if you do, you have it. You can use 2 teaspoons of that. And then shrimp. So I have 1.5 pounds, like any amount would work. You can put in a little bit or a lot. And then some green onions to put on the end. A couple of green onions to sprinkle over the top, and we're good to go. So with all that chatter, let's get cooking. All right, so since this is a French dish, it's got French inspiration, and the Cajun culture has huge French influences. We're going to do our mise en place. So let's start with chopping everything we've got, making our piles, getting everything ready to go, so that when we start our soup, it's going to go smoothly. You won't have to panic and be like, oh my gosh, there's soup everywhere, and I need to chop the onions, and what about these peppers, and like all that stuff. So let's do our mise en place, get everything where we need it to go, and then we can go from there and start making our roux and our soup. I'm going to use my favorite trusty, rusty old vegetable cleaver knife, and let's see. I think we should start with the bell peppers. So get your bell peppers out, and I'll show you the ways with a new ingredient that we haven't covered yet in this class. Maybe we should switch to the old chop can. Once we got the chopper out, we should switch to the chop can. Close up. All right. So here is a bell pepper. You got the stem. You got the bottom where the blossom was. And there's seeds all inside. This is actually a fruit. People say it's a vegetable, but it's a fruit because it's housing the seeds. And what I like to do is slice it right down Main Street. Shabam. Like so. You end up with 2 halves like this. Now from here, you can get a hold of that stem, and it's almost like a convenient little handle for you to break the pepper seeds out. And they come out kind of in this little I don't know what you call this. It looks like a honeycomb almost. But yeah, pull that out, and then you can shake the seeds that are left out of there. And then I like to pull some of these kind of white colored ribs, they call them ribs, out a little bit as well. That'll get the last of the seeds out. And then you've got yourself a nice half of a pepper. Do the other half like so. If you get one of those shoulders attached to the edge here, just break those little shoulders off. That's good stuff. We don't want to waste that. And then put the stems aside. That stem looks like a little elf hat. Like, oh, so if a little elf pops out of one of these peppers someday, I won't even be surprised. I'll be like, oh, hey, how's it going? Good to see you. I was wondering where you were. Okay, so we've got 1 red pepper. I'm going to do this green pepper as well, straight down Main Street. Like so. Then I'll pop this little seed head out of here and kind of rip the ribs out. I'm not showing you guys. Pop the seed head out, rip the ribs, and then you've got yourself a nice seeded pepper. And then another pepper, just like so. Now, some people I've heard, they're like, oh, I don't like peppers. And I'm like, wait a minute. You don't like peppers? There's so many different flavors of pepper. And bell pepper, of all the peppers, is probably one of the most relaxed of the pepper flavors. I always feel like it's important to call them sweet peppers. People don't realize these are sweet peppers. They're not spicy, and they have a lot of like sweetness to them. If you just crunch one, you'll realize like, sure, there's a peppery flavor, but it's not that strong, and it's actually got a lot of sweetness. Some of them are so sweet. I used to grow some out in California when I lived out there, and the hot summers would produce these really sweet little skinny peppers, and I would just eat them like they were carrots or maybe like fruit almost. It was awesome. So, all right, once you get your peppers all cut up, now the best way I think to do it is to either flip it over and kind of crush it flat, so you're laying it out flat like so, or you can cut up the sections. Like, see how they have these ribs running through? Almost looks like a rib. You can cut those up to shrink them down so they're a little more manageable. But I just like to push them flat, kind of break them in places. You can kind of, roughhouse with them a little bit. And then get your claw going again, get your knife hand, holding your knife in the right place where the blade meets the handle, a nice pinch, and then start sawing away at it, cutting some nice strips like so. If you're having any trouble cutting through the skin, try flipping it over and cutting it from the fleshy part down towards the skin. Sometimes that's a little easier. But ultimately, you're going to cut these long strips and then turn them sideways and then chop them into smaller chunks. And what I always think about with gumbo or when I'm cooking anything like this, where you're like wondering, how big should I cut the pieces? Well, picture a spoon. You're going to eat this with a spoon. So I want you to picture, how big you would want a chunk of pepper to be so that you get some of that pepper and then some of everything else on your spoon. Now, I'm just going to get a spoon for you guys so we can visualize this together because, there's lots of different sized spoons. And I'm kind of a big fella, so I like a big, big spoon here. So check that thing out. So I picture like, would I want to dip into my gumbo and come out with a chunk of pepper this big? Be like, that seems a little bit big. Let's say I could break that in half. You're like, that's still a bit of too big of a piece. And I always tell people this, like, think about when you're eating your soup, you want to be able to like scoop some soup, and maybe if 4 little peppers were in there with a bunch of other stuff, a little bit of sausage, some onion, maybe some okra, some garlic, some shrimp, all that could sit on that spoon if there's only a little bit. So little pieces, the size that you would want to eat it if you were presented with a bowl of this delicious stew. So I kind of ruined one of my peppers there, but that's all right. It doesn't matter. I'll just chop it up anyways. Cut yourself some nice long strips. Remember to use your knife like a saw blade. You're sawing at it. You're not hacking at it. You're not trying to be, top chef, showing off your knife skills right now. You're trying to efficiently cut through them. So, take it, use your claw, hold everything together, and then slice these little cubes, it's almost like diced peppers. And I'd say a lot of chefs would probably be like, but Ian, what about all those curly cute ends? Maybe you should, this is how a chef in a fancy restaurant would do it. They would hack off this piece, then they'd hack off this piece, then they'd unroll this whole thing. See how it's nice and square? And then they'd cut perfect little matchsticks, julienne. They would julienne it just perfectly like so. I'm trying to do a good job. So I'm saying perfect while I kind of butcher it myself. And then, you get these nice little sticks, and then you can flip them over sideways and cut these perfect little, they would even be mad at this. They'd say, no, take that down, cut that like that. And now you've got these perfect little sticks. Then they come back and cut perfect little cubes. And, I think there's some real value to being able to do that, like to make some really nice, even, perfect cubed ingredients like so. But here's my problem with it. These 2 pieces just go in the compost. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's like a lot of pepper right there. So if you want to get real fancy, by all means, but I just like making sure everything makes it in. I spend too much time out in the garden growing a lot of these ingredients. I didn't grow these peppers by any means, but I just appreciate how much work it went into growing the food that we're eating, that I can't stand like throwing it away if I don't have to. And, throwing away the stuff that goes in the compost it's good to compost if you can, because it'll go into back into the garden or into your soil or your house plants or something like that. But I mean, if we took all the trouble to grow it and get it to my house from wherever it was grown, I don't want to waste it. So I use every little bit. So that's kind of why I'm telling you guys, just push that half of the pepper flat and chunk it up. You don't have to worry. Cooking can be very intimidating when you watch it on television and you watch pros doing it. And what I don't want people to think that cooking is intimidating. I want them to think like, hey, I can do that. And I know that you can. So that's kind of why we're doing it this way, the old smash and slice technique. But forget all these bumpy edges. We got some bumpy edges in our soup. I'm cool with that. Now, gumbo, I think, is also a really interesting. It's interesting to learn about how gumbo came to be. And one of the things that I didn't know until I was doing some research this week was that gumbo is usually made on Sundays. And it's sort of like a celebratory dish that people make. They spend all day cooking gumbo, hanging out with each other. whether it was going to church or just spending time with family. The Cajun culture that exists down in Louisiana, specifically down near New Orleans in the bayou, is a really cool culture that I learned spends a lot of time celebrating their time together as family or celebrating their weekends. And so by cooking together, everyone gets to kind of hang out around a big iron pot and watch this thing simmer, and they'll spend time chopping ingredients at different points. Maybe they're throwing in oysters straight out of the Gulf of Mexico. They're shucking oysters right next to the pot and throwing them in when they're all done. Any number of things can go into a gumbo. It could just be like sausage and chicken, or I've seen everything from crawfish, like I showed you before, or to oysters, even scallops. Any kind of seafood, fish can go into a gumbo. You name it. So there's no real rules. I mean, I think each region would have their own rules, and they'd say this is the way you make gumbo. But since we're up here in the mountains, it doesn't really matter. We don't have to follow their rules. We can say, hey, thank you for the inspiration. This is glorious. And we're going to add some of our own flavors as well. But gumbo is just like a mixture of all sorts of things. And then I also learned that a lot of people in New Orleans, since they are right there in Hurricane Alley, they get lots of hurricanes right through that area. Hurricanes can cause some serious flooding. And when you get flooding in a city, like all sorts of things can get washed up and mixed up. And so it's kind of an intense thing to see a big flood in a city and see everything floating by. But New Orleans, people in New Orleans have a pretty good sense of humor about it. And the poet laureate wrote a poem about gumbo, but it's called See You in the Gumbo. And it's sort of like something that people would say to each other in New Orleans when a big hurricane was on its way. They knew it was going to hit overnight, and they're going to wake up in the morning to flooding or something like that. They would say, all right, see you in the gumbo, meaning I'll see you tomorrow when the whole city's flooded and we got to wade our way around town. And it's a way of staying good natured in the face of what can be somewhat intense disaster. So, it's always good to have, it's kind of cool to see in a cuisine that they've got references to their cuisine right there in their own sort of disaster preparedness. Okay, cool. So I've been yammering on for a while now. We got our peppers chopped, hopefully. Thumbs up if your peppers are chopped. And if they're not, then, we can wait a little longer. All right, I'm seeing some thumbs. Cool. An ingredient that I did not mention is celery. I forgot to mention it. 3 stalks of celery. Now, I have about 10 stalks here, but they're tiny. They're from the heart of my celery bunch. But, if you kind of measure them out, you call that 1 stalk. We'll call that 2 stalks there, and then we'll call that 3 stalks. That'll do. This is some small little, the heart of the celery, but celery hearts. But celery is another super important ingredient. And what they call the Holy Trinity down there in Louisiana. It's when you have peppers, celery, and onions together. Now, in France, I think it's onions, celery, and carrots make up their sort of foundational cuisines. They call it mirepoix. It's like the basis of so many recipes. They use carrots, onions, and celery. Now, in Louisiana, of course, it's not France, but it has heavy French influences, hence the andouille sausage. And but they have a different type of mirepoix, a different type of mixture of vegetables that is the base of their cuisine. And that's based on where they live. And I think it's because carrots can grow down there for sure, but they get a lot of peppers, a lot of onions, and a lot of celery. And so it's like, hey, let's use what we've got. So in New Orleans, the mirepoix equivalent is what they like to call the Holy Trinity of Cajun cuisine: peppers, celery, and onions. Now notice I'm just cutting these celery pieces into just like similar size to my peppers, like just cutting up these ribs. They call them celery ribs, and sometimes they're a little thick on the end. So sometimes when I've got a big thick end, I'll just cut it part way like this. And you can see how I've cut my celery, not the whole way down, just the wide part. So now these 2 pieces are the same size, and hopefully they're going to be the same size as this right here. So if you have a really thick end like most celery does, just cut the end halfway or part way, and then cut down the sides, chop it down into little little ribs, little half C's. And if you've got any leaves on there, some people say to cut off the leaves. If you've got a big stalk, you can cut off those leaves. I don't have as much celery as I thought I did, so I am going to use the leaves. I think the leaves have delicious flavor. They're just not quite as crunchy as the stalks, but they'll offer a lot of good flavor anyways. And celery is one of those funny vegetables that they say it takes more energy for us to chew it up and digest it than it gives us. So like usually you eat food and you get energy. It's like charging your battery. But I've heard that celery is actually the opposite. It's so funny that we love to eat celery as a society because it actually like takes energy away from us. But people say like, why would we eat this? They forget that celery also offers tons of vitamins, nutrients, and minerals that are really essential for our body. So maybe it burns some calories for us to digest this fibrous vegetable, but we can't forget that it's offering all sorts of other good sort of hydrating and nutrient-rich qualities. So chop up your celery. That was 3 stalks. Mine were pretty small. You can see my pile of peppers are bigger than my celery pile, but that's okay. Yours could be the same size, or one could be smaller than the other. Don't worry about it. We're making our little mirepoix, our Cajun mirepoix here. So let's work on our onions next, so we can add that. Now I've got 2 tiny onions here, so let's make some room. And we'll go over the onion slicing technique again, the dicing technique that we've done, where it's kind of like slicing it from root to leaf, and then cutting it like a book. So if you remember, I got roots on the bottom, leaves on the top. We're going right down Main Street, shabam. And then that gives me a chance to cut off the leaf portion, just the top, leafy portion, and leaving the roots to hold everything together. There's the roots with the leaf portion removed. Now you can peel. Oh my gosh, I'm already getting blasted. I gotta get my ski goggles on. Quick. Emergency. All right, we're good now. I got clear goggles. See, that's the thing people don't realize. Like, these are actually my kitchen goggles. They're clear. They don't even provide any sun protection. Okay, so we're gonna peel this onion, peel the skin around the outside, getting down to below the papery parts of our onion skin, leaving us a nice, tender little oniony middle. And I'm gonna do a whole bunch because mine are pretty small. So I'm gonna do this a bunch of times. So you guys probably remember the drill, but I'll start you off with a little reminder here. Here are my 2 onions. Let's scrape away some spot here. The roots are now facing away from me, and I'm slicing just almost to the end of the roots, but not quite. Using my knuckle to protect my fingertips, using my claw, using my knife like a saw. Tiny little saw cuts get you partway through, and then when you get to the end here, it's like kind of scary to do that last one. Just skip it if it's too scary. This is a tiny little onion, so there's not a lot to hold on to. And then once you do that, you end up with this book type. I call it the onion, the story of the onion. It's got all these pages here attached by the roots in the middle. Once you've got those cut, then you just come back the other way, and you got perfect little diced onions going right off the end of the roots, and then you have a little root handle to hold on to, and there you go. So I'm gonna do that like I think 5 more times because I have such tiny little onions. Now I grew these onions in the garden last year, and I'm running a little bit low on my onions, and I realize I've been picking all the choice big ones out, and all I have left are these little stragglers. And I'm amazed that they're still holding up, to be honest. They often get pretty soft and sometimes go a little moldy. But these little ones have been holding up, and I'm like, okay, well, let's use them. I grew them for a reason. Now, onions are super fun to grow, but they can be a pain when it comes time to cure them. You want to like dry them out right. And man, I used to live in a place where you could pick your onions and they'd be cured in like 3 days. They'd have this papery skin on the outside, and they'd be ready to last for the winter. But around here, I'm always picking them so late that I feel like they take forever to cure, and sometimes they don't cure all the way, and I don't get very papery skin on the outside. And that papery skin is almost like a package. It's like protecting it. it's better than plastic wrap. It's its own version of a little like a little house, a little shell that it lives in. And if you can get a nice dry layer on there, you're going to have some better storage of your onions. But the other cool thing that people don't realize about onions is that every single layer of onions that we see here was a leaf at some point. And so it's the outer leaves that are dying, that are drying up to make this like papery outside. And you can count how many leaves this onion was going to have by counting the layers. Now, not all the leaves didn't make it out. See these little green points here? Those are leaves that are trying to emerge from the middle, and they just didn't get a chance to pop out in time. But they're still sitting there waiting for next year. And if I hadn't picked them, they would have, come shooting out of there first thing in the spring, and we'd have new layer of, or some new onion growth. But they would be leaves, those layers. And instead, when I pick them, I catch them when the bulb is nice and big, and all the little leaves are packed in there, and we get to eat them all winter long. All right, so there I'm going back across my book sliceage, and then again, this is getting a little bit too close for comfort, so I'm going to throw that to the side, and then we'll do this last one. Oh wait, I might do one more. We'll see where you guys are in your onion journey. Everyone's onion journey is different. It's not like, it's so funny that you see recipes and they say one medium onion. You're like, what does that mean? How big is this onion? Is this a small one? How many of these should I use? I don't know. So there's my book held together, my slices where I didn't slice all the way through, the roots are still holding. And then off I go, cut in the opposite direction, like a grid, and get a nice little dice on this onion. Same here. I've got my layers like that, all kind of fold apart, but sticking together from the roots. And here we go, cross-section cut. And we have got ourselves a big honking pile of diced onion. And when you get to the end, you can kind of cut these sides, but don't cut your finger. Whatever you do, it's not worth the onion for losing a fingertip. So, all right, now check out my piles. They're looking fairly similar. I definitely have more peppers than anything because my peppers are pretty big. Then the onions are probably second, with celery as the third in quantity. But this is totally fine. You don't have to, worry about these being perfectly matched or measuring too much or getting too worried about any of these ingredients, because as I always try to teach you guys, these are just starting places for us to work. And then, you guys can add all your different flavors as you get used to cooking them. Okay, so thumbs up. I gotta put my glasses back on after chopping those onions. Thumbs up if you're done with your onions. How we doing out there, Charlotte? Can you see?
Yeah, we're looking okay. I'm Silas. Thumbs down.
We should wait a little bit. I should slow down, give people a chance to catch up.
I'm getting mixed messages, guys. Yeah, I don't know. I think we can start the garlic and then take some time after that.
All right, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to stir our roux for quite some time. So there'll be time to catch up there, especially if you have some help in the kitchen. But yeah, I can take you off on garlic land. This is the garlic that we have is called a hard neck garlic, and it has that hard neck running through the middle. That's the stem that was holding the garlic up. And then I broke off, let's see, 3 cloves. My recipe calls for 6, but this one is an absolute freak of nature. It's way bigger than my thumb. And so I'm going to call that one 2.5. This one's like 2, and this one's almost 2 as well. So I think I have about 6 cloves here, relatively speaking. Now, if you have soft neck garlic, you'll often find that there's not this hard stem running through the middle, and instead there's tons of tiny little cloves right in the middle there. So if it says 6 cloves and you only have these tiny ones, you might want to do like 7 or 8 or 9 of those tiny little cloves that are in the middle of your different garlic. So it all depends on what you got here, but I got a handful of garlic here. It's going to treat me just right. And if you love garlic, put more in. If you don't love garlic, don't put as much in. I'd say still put a little bit, though. And it goes a long way, and you don't necessarily taste it as a small quantity. And if you don't like garlic, then I would recommend just eating a bunch of raw garlic, and then when you taste it cooked, you'll be like, wow, that's actually pretty mellow compared to when it was just totally raw. And then I like to use a jar. A lot of chefs use their knife and they smash the garlic clove with their knife. They'll put the blade sideways on here, and then they hit the blade. And I used to do that too until one of my friends who works in the ER said that the most common kitchen injuries they see are, number one, bagel slicing. And I've been there. Slicing bagels is difficult, and they're wobbly. Number two, cutting the pits out of avocados. People like to hack at the avocado with their knife, like hack it into the pit and twist it out. And it works really well until you miss and hit your hand. And then the third one is people putting their blades of their knives on their garlic and punching down on it like this and cutting their hand pretty good. So I like to use a jar or anything that's hard enough to just barely smash the garlic enough to crack the skin, but not to smash it to oblivion. And if the skin cracks nicely, you can just peel that skin right off, and you got yourself an intact little garlic clove. This one's actually huge, but yeah, it's a thing of beauty. And just like the onions, these are related to onions. You got roots on the bottom, and the leaves are just starting to poke out here on the top. You can actually see on mine, there's some little leaves coming through, and the middle part will be green as well because it's getting late. Garlic sitting in my kitchen knows what time of year it is. It's just sitting here drying out in my kitchen, and it's sitting there being like, it's probably like February 21st, I'd bet. If I had to, hey, garlic, hey, other garlic in here, what would you guess? February 21st, thereabouts? All right, cool. And it's just starting to grow out its leaves. I can't do anything to stop it. It's just saying, hey, here I come. And I think the garlic that's out in my garden is growing the same way. I mean, it's been growing its roots all winter, and it's just starting to poke through so that when the snow finally melts, I see little leaves sticking out of the soil as soon as the snow melts. So garlic is a very cool crop to grow around here. It's impressive how much it loves the cold. Okay, so then from here, we're going to mince this up. So just start with your claw and your knife and rolling it back and forth, just cutting as thin a slice as you can from the very beginning. Check out that leaf growing right in the middle. It's trying to pop out. It's a little garlic shoot. And I'm holding on to that dried little root end as my handle until the bitter end. And then I'm like, okay, it's not worth it. I'm throwing that in the compost. And then I'm going on to the next one. I'm going to slice this garlic down as thin as you can to start. Let's see if I can show you guys the old newspaper trick. You go to culinary school, they're going to say, I want to be able to read I want to read my newspaper through your thinly sliced garlic. So I'm just going to do as thin as I can. All right, that's looking pretty good. Let's find some newsprint. We'll use my Cajun seasoning topper here. Plunk that down there. I don't know if you can read it through there. Not thin enough. Didn't pass the test, Ian. All right, let's try it again. Let's go as thin as possible. Oh, that one was looking good until I got it. All right, I'll try again. I got to get my practice going. I'm going to get a fresh one. This big one's going to be nice to hold on to. This is me passing my culinary school test, which I never took because I never went to culinary school. But I hung out with a lot of people who did, and they told me all these tricks. They're like, he wanted to be able to read his newspaper through my garlic slice. I'm like, oh man, that's some serious pressure, especially if it's bad news under there. Okay, let's see here. We'll try the side here. I think the black might come up better. Oh, can you read it? Can you see it says calories through there? Kinda. You can kind of read it. It's not easy reading. Tablespoon. There. 1 tablespoon. I can read that. What does that say? 1 serving? 1 serving through the garlic. Not bad. All right, so that makes my point. As thin as you can get it from the start here. If you start with the thinnest slices that you can get from the beginning, you're perfecting your skill as a knife smith, but you're also shortening the amount of mincing that you have to do because it's already so thin that once you get to rocking chair mince mode, the little tiny leaves of garlic have already pretty much been minced once, so that it happens a lot more quickly. And that matters also, like in a chef setting, when you're working at a restaurant and someone hands you, 50 cloves of garlic and they say, oh, mince all these, please. And you're like, wait, it's going to take me 20 minutes. They say, well, you only have 5. You say, okay, all right, let's do this. That's when you're like, all right, I'm going to start thin so that I can just switch to this mince mode where I now have my pile of garlic. I'm just going to chop it up, rock and roll. rocking chair through, kind of back and forth, leaving the tip of the knife on there all the time, and then constantly scraping the pile back together, and then running that blade through again. And in no time, you will have yourself some smithereens. And I think smithereens is the most underutilized word in the culinary dictionary. I've never heard another chef say smithereens. And I think it's pretty specific and accurate to what we're doing here. I mean, you could say, like, I want a fine mince, or you could say, cut this into smithereens. I think everyone knows what that means. A fine mince could be anything. Like, is this fine? Am I doing a fine job? Do I feel fine? It's kind of vague, but when it comes down to smithereens, everyone knows, like, you need to obliterate this thing, disintegrate it. All right, so this looks like, somewhat smithereenish. So I'm feeling good about that pile of garlic. That is a healthy pile. It's probably in the 3 tablespoons range, if not more. I love garlic, and I know that Cajun cooking, garlic is a big part of it, so I'm going to make that be the final pile. Looks like it might be a lot, but I'm into it. Let's do it. And then I'm going to wash my hands, get that garlic off of there. And then we're going to switch back and finish all of our mise en place. I don't know what else we have to do, actually. Maybe it's just the okra. Is that looking right? So maybe we might just be into okra land. A lot of you may have chopped okra already. But let me see. Peppers, celery, garlic. I guess we can chop up our sausage if it's, yeah, we'll chop that up at last. So let's do the okra and the green onions. If you have green onions, you can do those. So these little okra veggies or fruits, as you want to call them, are beautiful. And they have this little top where the stem was. And I was chatting with one of our class attendees' grandfathers about this glorious vegetable. And he told me the most flavorful part of the okra is that top right there. So don't throw that away. If you see that in there, include that. And then all I like to do is, find somewhere to hold on and cut rings. Nice little rings of okra like this. And this was frozen, but I've only had it out for a few minutes, and it's pretty easy to cut. But you can see those cool little seeds in there, these little rings that it makes. All this combines to make a really nice texture. And although I called it slimy, I don't want you to be scared, because it's slimy when it's raw. And it's not even that slimy when it's raw. It's slimier than a lot of other veggies that people have had. I think it's delicious raw, actually. And, it's prepared many different ways. A lot of times fried okra is a really common thing. But I think the texture of this, once it's cooked, is it's very unique, and it makes a really delicious soup. So I add okra to all sorts of things, like different thickeners. Like, for example, I like to make chicken pot pie. Now, that's like making a really thick chicken soup and then baking it inside of a pie crust. Chicken pot pie is one of my favorite foods on the planet. And I think okra is a secret and underutilized ingredient in the chicken pot pie filling, because it adds that richness, that thickness to the soup that you need in a chicken pot pie, or else it's just runny, broth, and that doesn't work. Isn't that a beautiful, aren't the okra slices beautiful? Little rings, and those are their seeds inside, and the seeds are they're perfectly round. And I love them when they're all dried out. They look like little eyeballs or 8 balls from a pool table when they're dried. They've got a little pointy spot. That's where the root comes out. And then other than that, they're just a perfect little sphere. So they're pretty cool. So chop up your okra. I said 1/2 cup to 1 cup. And then I, of course, I do about like 1 1/4 cups. So I've got a lot here, but I love okra, so I'm going for it. I like a big, thick, chunky stew. So how's this mise en place looking? Things in their place. Mise en place. So peppers, celery, onion, garlic, and okra. Last couple things we need to do before we start cooking. And it's 5:23, so we're actually doing really well, I think, in terms of getting everything done. Let's chop our green onions. The green onions are going to go on the gumbo last. And, you don't have to cook them. You just have to have them chopped, ready to go. And so that's why I'm going to chop them now. And then what to serve with your gumbo. Now, I like to dip a thick, crusty bread in mine. I like to eat it straight too. I also eat it straight a lot, so just with nothing else. But during my research this week, I learned that a really traditional thing to serve with gumbo is rice. So if you guys have rice and you want to cook up some rice with it, read the package on your rice package and figure out how long it takes to cook. And I'd say rice can be tricky, but it can also be pretty simple. And the best advice that I can give to rice makers out there is read the package that you get it from. Every package I've gotten has different instructions, but they know their rice the best. They know how big the grains are. They know how tough the outer bran is. And so, they know that it's like 12 minutes, cook this for 12 minutes or 20 minutes, or you name it. So read the package, read the instructions. That's the best way to cook rice, if you ask me. Same with pasta. It's one of those things where you just need, like we did with our shells, you need to see what time it says, and then follow those instructions. But the way they serve the rice is just you put a dollop of rice in the middle of your gumbo after it's served, and that's all she wrote. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. I'm going to do this green onion. Hopefully you can see here. I've got my claw going. Your knife skills are getting really good. These green onions are way better than regular onions. Way easier to slice. They turn into these nice little rounds. And you can cut all the way down to the green part. Start at the white part where the roots are. Cut the roots off. And then when you get down to the green part, see this kind of sad looking leaf? I'm going to peel that one off, but this one's looking good. So I'm going to chop that one up. You can kind of assess your green onions. However long they've been in the fridge is often how much of the green I use. And these have been in the fridge for a while. So see, these greens are looking pretty sad down here. So I'm probably just going to break this off right here. That one's looking real sad right there. That one's looking kind of tired there. And then boom, I'm going to cut the rest of this up into little tiny rounds. When green onions are nice, you don't have to do the whole slicing it like a book. You can just kind of dive right in. There you have it, big pile of green onions. Now, sometimes this happens to me, where I don't cut all the way through, and it almost is like a book, but that's all right. You can just kind of rip those up. That's because I wasn't cutting all the way through with my knife, so that shows me I need to, on this next one, I need to make sure that I use it like a saw blade and really cut through. There we go. Those are all cut and cleanly. Really making contact with the cutting board, not letting my thumb sneak out there and get beheaded. I love my thumb, and I feel like I use it all the time. I hitchhiked up Teton Pass a couple days ago, and I needed my thumb to get up to the top. Without my thumb, people would have just thought I was standing there watching, just holding my hand out, just like I needed hitchhiking. It's one of those things you don't want to do too much in life, but there's a couple spots where you can do it. I feel like Teton Pass is a safe place to go hitchhiking just to get to the top. It was a powder day after all. All right, so that's looking good. The last thing I think we should cut up is our sausage. And I often recommend using a separate cutting board for your meat. So I'm going to pull out this other cutting board here. And I'm going to cut my meat on a different cutting board so that it's not, mixing with the veggies. Even though we're all going to cook it together, it's just good practice. And then the other thing about this sausage is this is fully cooked sausage. So we don't have to cook it from raw meat. So it's not raw meat on the counter here either. It's cooked. But that said, it's still smart to use a different cutting board because it's just a good habit to get whenever you're using meat. I just like to use a separate cutting board to just so I know I'm like, oh, this is my meat spot and this is my veggie spot, and they don't get cross-contaminated. A lot of times I'll use a different knife even, but today I think we're done with veggies for now, so I'm just going to use this knife to cut it. Plus, we're cooking everything together, which is kind of a nice thing about making a soup like this. You don't have to worry about cross-contamination as much. It's when you're cooking raw vegetables, or not cooking, sorry, when you're serving raw vegetables that you've chopped with a knife that you used for raw meat, that's when you get into trouble. This is a tough package to open. But my recipe says 8 ounces. And so this is a 12-ounce package. So I'm going to use 3 of these sausages. I can't even get them open. These things are intensely packaged. There we go. I'm going to use 3 of those sausages there. Put the rest of this away. And then, the rest I'll save for later. But if you want to add more sausage, like if you have a 4-pack, just use all 4. If you like sausage, it's going to be good. You can't hurt adding a little more sausage there. I'm just doing the 3 because that's pretty much close to 8 ounces. So, yeah, I think that's good. Now, the way I like to chop the sausage is to kind of get it into little rings as well. So you can do 2 things. You can hold this and cut the rings just like so, and kind of cut them the same thickness each time so that each piece is the same thickness. It's kind of key so they cook well. And then the other thing you can do is you can go down Main Street once if you want, like so. And then cut these little half moons. Half rings. They're not really rings, discs. So whatever you like. If you think you want to have smaller pieces of sausage and more of them, cut them this way. Cut them down Main Street and then cut a bunch of little side pieces, half moons. And then if you want to have a bigger chunk of sausage, don't cut it down Main Street. Instead, just cut these nice discs like this. I like the bigger discs, so I'm just going to do the cut. I'm going to cut them just like this, so that they're like a nice disc that's not too thick. It'll sit on my spoon with some other goodies, but I know I'm eating a sausage bite when I have a bigger chunk like this, and that's kind of what I like to go for. But again, like anything you like this is your journey, chef. You guys are the chefs, so I'm just here to give a little guidance and maybe provide a little entertainment, crack some jokes, and then send you on your way to a happy, healthy eating. Now, andouille sausage, really, it's a pork sausage, and you can get all sorts of. You can get other, like you can get chicken sausage with this flavoring. But the real important thing about it is that it is a little spicy, although not too bad. And I think the most important part of the andouille sausage is that it's smoked. You get a real nice smoky flavor from andouille sausage. And that's, I think, the smoked paprika that they add inside, and the way they'll smoke the actual sausage in a smokehouse. And so I think andouille sausage is one of the most important ingredients to a gumbo to give it that gumbo flavor. A lot of you guys were asking about your Cajun seasoning, and Cajun seasoning will definitely get you partway there. But a good andouille sausage with this nice strong flavor, it's going to get you the rest of the way. So I feel like we're looking pretty good here. The last thing I want to do is I'm just going to thaw my shrimp a little bit more. So someone was asking about shrimp earlier. And the way I'm going to do that is get a bowl here. And I'm going to put my shrimp into the bowl. I'm going to do it over here by the sink. And then I'm going to pour some cold water over the top. Cold water, better than warm water. You don't want to use warm water to thaw out your shrimp. You want to just use cold water because they get too warm too fast with warm water, and they cook a little bit. And we don't want to cook them yet. We want them to be nice and tender and juicy. We don't want to overcook them. So it's really important that you use cold water on your frozen shrimp. And it does feel weird. You're like, oh man, why would I use cold water to thaw something out that's frozen? But the point is, you want to thaw it slowly. And the slower it thaws, it doesn't even have to be fully thawed by the time you throw it in there. But check it out. There's my shrimp in a bowl. They were just frozen and covered in ice crystals a moment ago. Now they're thawing slowly in some cold water. And the water helps me rinse things off. Now mine they have the shells on and the tails. And I'm going to leave mine intact like this. We'll shell them out of ours. If yours don't have that, it's totally cool. But one thing you do want to really pay attention to is if your shrimp is cooked already. If your shrimp is already cooked, then you want to add that shrimp at the very last second of your cooking process. So like right before you serve it, you can add the shrimp. If your shrimp is uncooked, you can add it like 10 minutes or 15 minutes, still at the end. But I'll talk a little more about that. But before you start thawing out your shrimp, check to see if it's cooked or not cooked. All right, so if you wouldn't mind switching over, Charlotte, to the old stove cam here, then we're gonna get going here. I think I see some people chopping out there, and I'm happy to see that.
I think one question we have is, like, what does a pound and a half of shrimp look like?
Look like? Okay, good question. Now, each shrimp size has a different number on it. So there's also different types of, sizes of shrimp. And this one says 16 to 20 shrimp per pound. Right on the front of the bag there, it says 16 to 20 shrimp per pound. Now I've seen as many as like 70 shrimp per pound. And these are big shrimp. The one I have, it's really hard to tell. But what I also recommend people do is you probably have a pound of pasta in your house somewhere. Like, here's a thing of spaghetti. And you're like, this is a pound, 16 ounces. Perfect. You can check it even. And what I do is I just eyeball it. You don't have to worry too much. Just kind of weigh it in your hands and say like, this weighs about the right amount. And don't forget, you might have a bowl in your hand or something, but take the shrimp in your hand, take some pasta. You can do a little weighing that way. If not, if you don't have a scale, then try to look for that count to see if it says, how many shrimp per pound.
Okay, Silas, do you have a question?
Yeah. So we have a 2-pound bag of shrimp.
Yeah. So yeah, perfect. And it's unopened. You've never opened it?
Not yet. No.
Cool. Then yeah, I'd say you can use half of it or a little more than half, and you'll be good. And also remember, like if you love shrimp and you're going to eat 45 shrimp, just you, then you might want to throw all 2 pounds in there. All right, folks, I think we're feeling pretty good. Thumbs up, we're ready for the next step. Are we good? Should we start cooking? Okay, cool. Mise en place is ready. We're pretty much French at this point. We've created a mise en place. We are about to make a roux, which is spelled R-O-U-X. When the roux is done, that means you're essentially French. So you'll get your passport in the mail probably in like the next couple of weeks. So yeah, let's do our roux. And I'm going to use my medium burner in the back here, my kind of like medium to smaller burner. And I'm going to do it over medium heat. So it's not like super hot, but we're going to need to play with our heat a lot. I have a gas burner. A lot of you might be working with an electric burner. So what we want to do is get our roux and our oil and our flour sizzling. And then I want you to pay close attention to that thing. We're not going to walk away while we make our roux. I'm going to use a spatula to stir it with so I can scrape the bottom completely every which way. We're also going to turn into human Zambonis. So this is all going to make sense in a minute, but let's start by assembling or getting our roux going by starting with a half a cup of oil and a half a cup of flour into a big, big pot, big enough to cook our whole, 3.5 quarts of stuff here. A half a cup of oil and a half a cup of flour. So where's my oil? Here's peanut oil, half cup measuring cup. Let's do this. I think I'm going to start with the flour, actually. I'm going to put my flour in first because I only have 1/2 cup measuring cup, which is silly. And I don't want to get it all oily. So just the flour is going to go into the pot, half a cup. Bada boom. Bada boom. That's kind of an Italian thing. I need to learn some like French phrases. I'm like, zut alors. And here's a half a cup of oil. Seems like a lot of oil, and it seems that way because it is. It's a lot of oil. All right, now into my pot goes half cup of oil, half cup of flour, and then I'm putting it on medium heat, and I'm going to start stirring right away. I'm just going to get my stir on right off the bat. And the reason that you want to constantly stir this thing is because you always want to scrape the bottom to keep it from burning. If you burn the roux, then the whole gumbo is going to taste like burnt popcorn, essentially. So we're going to sit here and just stir our roux together, and we're going to bond. We're going to tell stories. By the end of it, we're going to be essentially French. So it's going to be a big transformation for everyone here. But it's really important that you pay attention to the color of your roux when you start, and the color that it's going to turn, that it's going to transform. And we're going to do kind of a medium level roux here. We're not going to do a full on, intense Cajun roux. And I'm going to describe to you guys the differences as we do this stirring. But before I get going on a rant that will end somewhere unknown at this point, I want to tell you what you're looking for. you're looking for the roux to change colors and turn darker from this kind of white beige paste. It's going to turn, kind of a peanut butter color, and then eventually it's going to turn the color of a penny, like a copper penny, and then eventually it'll just turn black, and then you'll have burnt it at that point. But the other thing you need to look for is things sticking to the bottom. So that's why I'm saying you need to become a human Zamboni. And take a look. This is what I'm talking about. I'm covering the whole pot. I'm scraping the bottom of the whole pot, all the way from one side to the next. You guys have probably seen a Zamboni doing an ice rink. It can't miss a single spot, or else it's not going to be right. So I go back and forth, just scraping the bottom. Hopefully you can see that. That was kind of a crazy close-up. But scraping the bottom of the pot the entire time, not letting it stick or start to burn. And so that leads me to some other comments about roux. This is where we're building our flavor. This is where the whole flavor of the soup comes from. And I want you to think about caramelization. I have a lot to say about caramelization, so buckle up, all right? This is a lecture. We're in a lecture studio, a lecture class now. And basically, the crazy thing about caramelization is it comes from one of our favorite desserts, caramel or caramel. I don't know how you say it, and you can say it however you want. But the point of caramelization is that you're taking milk, essentially, and cream, and you're cooking it slowly, and you're cooking it over a long period of time, and you're boiling out the water, and you're turning that sugar into tasty flavor. And caramelization happens on everything from like a caramel or a caramel to a steak. When you get a crispy bit on the, slightly burnt on the outside bit of steak, that's caramelization. Think about the cheese on a slice of pizza that kind of bubbles up and burns at that crispy, cheesy edge. That's caramelization too. And I think that caramelization should be renamed flavorization, because that's what's happening. When you get that burnt piece of cheese, isn't it like a flavor bomb? And when you get that crispy, charred outside of a hamburger, that broiled outside of a hamburger, that's where all the flavor is. And so that's what we're building here. And so if you start to see your roux really simmering a lot, you can turn it down. See how mine is bubbling like crazy? And I'm moving it a lot, and it'll cook fast. As long as I keep moving it, it won't burn. But if you feel it sticking to the bottom or anything, you're getting worried about it burning, just slide it off the heat. Just turn your heat down, whatever you need to do. Electric burners, it's good to slide it off sometimes because they cool down slowly. And in the end, keep stirring it. Don't walk away. Don't, go bother your siblings. Don't, go out and ask your parents for a new bicycle or anything. Just stand right here and stir that roux and watch it change colors, because this transformation is crucial. And my grandfather always said he liked to cook his to the color of a copper penny. And I think that's pretty intense. Like, that is a strong flavored roux. It's almost too much for me. And so I'm shooting for peanut butter, the color of peanut butter, kind of brown. And you're gonna feel it sticking to the bottom of your pan a little bit. But that is okay. If you feel it sticking, just scrape what's stuck off. And don't let it stay stuck on there. Scrape it well so that you're getting everything off the bottom so it doesn't burn. All right, I feel like I made that point pretty clearly. I could say it again, but I'll say it again in a few minutes. But in the meantime, I'll tell you one other thing. If your roux is done, you can pull it off the heat and wait for me, or you can just add your veggies. That's, when the roux is the color of peanut butter, then you can just add your veggies, and we're gonna have to cook those veggies and stir them like crazy. And we're gonna take it to the very edge of Flavor Town with the veggies too. So, it's all good. So mine is starting to smell good. I'm starting to smell like almost that caramel flavor, almost that buttered popcorn flavor. It's kind of a nice flavor, buttered popcorn. But you don't want to get burnt popcorn, and that can happen really easily. But I'm curious, while we're stirring, do any of you guys have a favorite family dish that you like to make, or that you always ask one of your family members to make because they make it so well? And if so, raise your hand, and then Charlotte will call on you, and you can share with us. Tell us, and it can be anything. It doesn't have to be gumbo. It can be literally anything that you like. I just love hearing about people's family recipes. They're sort of their favorite, the thing they look forward to. Let's say when you go visit grandma and she makes the best, sunbuckle cookies or something like that. So raise your hand if you have anything you want to share.
It's like Silas might have something to share.
Nice.
Silas and Maddox, I should say. Dynamic duo.
Yeah, when you said the stuff that family members like to make that you ask them, so last year, Silas, on this cooking class made the chile, that stuff.
Oh,
And,
which one?
Chile.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah, and we always make that, at
Nice.
least every month.
Right on. I love it. So a recipe from this class is one of your favorites. That warms my heart. I gotta say, that really does.
Yeah. And also, one thing, so my roux is starting to kind of stick a little bit.
Yeah. Scrape it.
Yeah.
Is it black? Is it brown?
It's kind of like a light peanut butter color, I would say.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Scrape it and just keep scraping that bottom. And that applies to everyone. Mine is starting to stick too, and I'm starting to really smell some toasty, hot buttered popcorn smells here. So don't splash yourself with the oil. It can get pretty hot. So just stir it nice and gently, scraping the bottom gently, always moving it around, and you should be good. If you start to see any black or you smell any burn flavor, honestly, the best thing to do is restart and do it again. But if it smells good and it smells like kind of toasty and nutty and delicious, then you're in good shape. Just keep moving it around. Anyone else want to share a dish?
We got Miles.
So my grandpa, he has a house in Portland. And so whenever we go there, we like to go to this one food truck area. And we always like to get these things called Jean Bings. I don't know if anyone has ever had them, but they're Korean, North Chinese, kind of like crepes with wonton crackers and eggs and hoisin sauce and meat and stuff like that. It's very good.
They're savory. They're savory, not sweet.
Yes.
Oh wow, good. Can you say the name again? I don't know if I know it.
They're Jean Bings, I believe.
Cool. I'll have to check them out. It's amazing. We made empanadas last week. Every culture has their thing wrapped in bread, but I feel like every culture has their own crepe as well. And this sounds like a really tasty one. And when you go to the food trucks, is it the same one every time? It's a favorite spot that they make them the best, or can you get them all over the place?
I think there might be a couple food trucks, but I think that one is the best with the.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool.
All right.
All right. So in between here for a minute, mine is starting to get brown. I just want to show you guys. My roux is getting brown, and I'm getting ready. I'm going to add my veggies. So when the time comes, you add your veggies, and you keep scraping. So whenever you feel like your roux is the color that you want, and you're nervous it's going to burn or something, you add your veggies to this, and just keep scraping like crazy to keep everything from getting off the bottom, anything from burning on the bottom. So the same process. I might switch spatulas to a stronger spatula when I add the veggies, but that's just a little tip. But I've got a little ways I want to go. I'm going to build this flavor. I'm going to bring it to the very edge, the outskirts, the suburbs of Flavortown, and then I'm going to, I think that's a Guy Fieri reference, Flavortown, and somehow it's made its way into my lexicon, which is terrifying, but it's okay. We're all right. Anyone else want to share?
We do have a couple, but Maddox and Silas, do you have a question, or are you? Okay, yes.
All right, so my roux kind of looks like this kind of color. So
yeah.
Ooh,
okay, that's it. Take it off the heat. That's looking dark.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Nice. Now, if you feel like it's burned, I would say, give it a taste and see how it tastes, but let it cool. Don't taste it right now. Take a scoop, let it cool a lot, and then and then taste it. Do not burn yourself. It's going to be hot. You could even dip like a bell pepper in it or something and just taste it. Like that's the color of the roux that my grandfather would always make. But if it tastes burnt or anything, you could try again and then just, do it a little lighter this time. And I don't think you'll be too far behind, only a few minutes, but taste it. If you like the way it tastes, then you're good to go. If it tastes burned, then I'd say, dump it out and start again because it can't hurt you. Only 5 minutes behind. So, you'll be able to get the rest of it pretty easily.
Malu, you want to tell us what your family likes to cook?
Well, every Valentine's Day, my mom makes these. They're not cookies, they're called alfajores.
Oh,
And
nice.
they're an Argentine dessert. And
Cool.
and they're kind of like two shortbread cookies, not shortbread, but they kind of taste like shortbread. And in the middle, there's dulce de leche, which is kind of like caramel. And
Yeah.
it's really good. And sometimes they're covered in chocolate. But my mom makes
Nice.
the ones. And this is what they look like.
They're beautiful. They look amazing. Now, dulce de leche, yeah, that is like a caramel. It's brown and sweet. Is that right?
Yeah. Try it.
Oh my goodness, that sounds like a Valentine's Day treat. Now, I feel like you got to get some red in there somehow for Valentine's Day. So, maybe you could also do like a jam in there too, a jelly rather than dulce de leche some year. Mix it up a little bit. That sounds good though. All right, so we're gonna pause on stories real quick. We can talk some more if people have more, but my roux is looking good. It's the color of peanut butter, and you can see it here. I'm gonna add my veggies to it, and I think we're gonna be in good shape here for a really nice sizzle on our veggies. So the veggies are gonna go in, and things are gonna get a little bit action packed here. So here we go. Pepper's going in first. Don't let them splash up and burn you, because if you drop them in too fast, that roux is really hot and it can really get up there and scorch you. So be careful. Add your veggies, but don't add your garlic or your okra. And if you did add your garlic and okra already, that's okay. Just be really careful about burning. But generally we leave the garlic and the okra for later because garlic wants to burn really easily all the time. And I find that I like the flavor of gently cooked garlic more than like almost toasted garlic, although I've had some really well done garlic where it's like perfectly crispy and brown and kind of burnt, but it's so tasty. But I'm a little more gun shy there, so I try and hide the garlic in there at the end so it doesn't have any chance of burning. But stir your veggies in. That means your celery, your onions, and your bell peppers can all go in there now or whenever your roux is done. And then you've got to scrape and stir again. Scrape and stir. So I'm going to use maybe a stronger spatula this time for this portion because now I got to move a lot of veggies around and I really want to be able to scrape the bottom real well. Once you get the veggies in there, you can add your Cajun seasoning as well and your andouille sausage. I like the veggies to get in there first and then get them coated. So throw your veggies, your bell pepper, your onion, and your celery, toss it around the roux, but don't walk away too much. Stir it like crazy, just like we were stirring the roux. And then I'm going to add my andouille sausage as well as my 2 tablespoons of Cajun seasoning. So here we go. Sausage is going in. It's going to infuse the roux and the veggies with its sausagey goodness.
So
I'll stir that sausage in for a moment. Always scraping the bottom of my pan, not letting that roux burn. It's going to start turning more to a paste. It's going to be sticking to the bottom. But, it's okay. Scrape it. And once you can't scrape it anymore, that's when we're going to add our broth. So if you want to get your broth ready after you get your sausage in there and you're really stirring it, you can get your broth ready. And then that's the trick. The broth is like the fire extinguisher. As you scrape the roux off the bottom and the roux turns more and more brown, and the veggies start to soften and they get really good, but things are sticking and it's getting hard to scrape it off, then that's when you're going to have your broth there, and the broth can go in as a fire extinguisher. Once you pour the broth in, it's going to cool the pan down enough. You'll be able to simmer things without stirring it constantly.
Hey, Ian.
Yeah.
Update on the roux for Silas and Maddox. They said it kind of tastes like popcorn. Is that a good thing?
Yeah. Does it taste like burnt popcorn though? That would be the real question.
No, just tastes like.
Do you like it? Do you like the way it
Yeah,
tastes? I
it's
mean, I
pretty
know it
good.
doesn't probably taste great, but like, do you? Is it a
Yeah.
nice flavor?
It's good. It just tastes like freshly popped popcorn.
Cool. Then I think you're good. I think you made a really nice, rich roux. I saw you stirring it, so I imagine that you did a good job of just moving it around. So yeah, I think you're good to go. I think you'll know when it's burnt. It's gonna taste like carbon, like char.
Yeah,
So
just
I
one
think
more.
you're in good shape.
Oh, so we put the peppers in, and what else?
Yep, all your peppers, your onions, and your celery should go in at this point. And then you want to stir it the same amount that you stirred your roux. You want to keep moving it around. I kind of do a few things when it comes to making this step of the gumbo. I push it down flat and spread it out through the pan with my spatula, like I'm spreading, peanut butter across a piece of toast. I spread it out flat with my spatula. I let it cook for like 10 seconds and then get scraping again and scrape it off the bottom. And we're just trying to build a deeper brown color. We're trying to soften up the veggies, trying to get everything sort of all the flavors blended together while we keep pushing that caramelization as far as we can without burning it. So I think Silas took his roux to the very brink, which was awesome. But Silas, while you're stirring, make sure nothing's sticking to the bottom. Scrape everything and then add your broth. If you want to cool it down, you want to stop it from cooking very much more, you add that broth, and then that'll keep it from browning anymore. That'll stop the browning process. So keep a real close eye after you add your veggies and your sausage and your seasoning, stirring it all the time, scraping it off the bottom, and getting it into Flavorland. All right, so let's switch over to the chop cam if you wouldn't mind, and I'm going to add my seasoning, and we're going to go ham here. All right, so chop cam, I'm moving around here. It's going to become a stove cam for a little bit. There we go. All right, so mine, I put my spatula in there. Should never leave your spatula sitting in there. Let's see, I'm starting to get it my roux is sticking to the bottom. It's on my veggies, and little bits of the veggies and the roux are sticking to the bottom, and I'm scraping it really well and then spreading it back out. I'm going to add my 2 tablespoons of my Cajun seasoning. You can use less if you're worried about spice. Start with less Cajun seasoning, and you can add more later. But add a little bit now at least to get the flavor going, and let that permeate the veggies and the sausage. And then I'm just going to start mixing around. Man, when you add that Cajun seasoning, the kitchen just changes the flavor. The aroma changes from that popcorn flavor that I was getting on my roux. It changes into this like kind of like rich, smoky, delicious smelling base. So this is our soup base. And you can see how I spread it out flat, so it's covering the whole bottom of the pan, of the pot. And I let it sit for just a few seconds, but I know that roux is just browning under there. You can see all the little brown bits on the side. So, I'm not gonna leave it for long, and then I'm gonna come scrape that bottom up and let it kind of like rehydrate, and then spread it back out again and let it cook for 5-10 seconds, and then scrape it up again. Meanwhile, I'm getting my broth ready. So the broth is the fire extinguisher. Whenever you're ready and you feel like the veggies look soft, and your roux looks brown but not black, don't let it burn. Especially you, Silas. You be careful. You put that fire extinguisher on early if you need. Well, I want you to add the broth, and so it's 4 cups of broth. You can add 2 just to start, and that'll cool things down. And then I'd say from there you can add the other 2 cups, but adding even 1 cup will really cool things down. So I'm check out my roux. See the bottom of my pan right here? That brown stuff that's stuck to the white bottom of the pan, that is caramelizing, and that's flavor, but it's getting too brown, so I have to scrape it up and keep mixing it. The veggies have water in them, so they're helping keep the roux from burning totally. But when the veggies run out of water, then the fire extinguisher is really off, and we're going to see this sticking to everything. So I'm going to add my broth here in a couple seconds. I'm just going to try and milk this flavor building effort for a couple more stirs, and then I'm going to add this broth, and we're going to be off to the races. So, or no, the race will be over. We'll be calming down. So it's sitting there. I can smell it sort of almost burning on the bottom. Take a look when I scrape it, not too hard. You'll see I got those brown bits all around the bottom, stuck to the bottom. Scrape that off, and I'm going to do it one more time. I think that's all my roux is going to handle before it gets too brown and almost black. And then I'm going to pour in this broth. And if you have bouillon, you can just add water, and then you can stir in your bouillon afterwards. So you'll see, but the water will be the thing that cools the pot down. So there we go. This is my last flavor building effort. I'm just gonna look at all those yummy bits in there. Ooh, I can smell the sausage kind of crisping up. It's releasing some of the fats from the sausage are coming out. They're adding their smoky flavor to the whole dish. Oh man, I think it's getting close. All right, I'm gonna scrape it. I'm gonna do a loose scrape to show you what's under there. I got a lot of brown bits. See that whole area right there? A lot of brown bits. All right, now I'm gonna scrape it really good, and in goes my broth. Here we go. And really, you can't mess it up too much. It's all about like how intensely flavored or not intensely flavored it's going to be. So, like if you don't have a really, really dark roux or a really, really caramelized veggies, it's okay because, you can add a little more seasoning, a little more salt, and you can get a lot of those flavors from that. But I think it's just one of those things that separates, interesting dishes from really exceptional are little tiny moments, just like that, where we're scraping the bottom of our pan. We're letting that roux get dark color. We're letting the veggies brown. It's just one of those things where a technique is involved to kind of up the ante a little bit. So I've added my broth. It's looking glorious. I'm going to just bring this to a simmer now so I can turn my heat back up. Mine was kind of on medium. Now I'm going to go up to medium high, like so. Stir it, but now you don't have to stir it as much. You can kind of you can start looking at the next steps. So some other things you can do once you got your broth in there, open up your can of tomatoes, and the tomatoes can go in. I like to add my Tabasco now as well. So I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of Tabasco. And so here's my Tabasco sauce. And Tabasco is spicy as well. So if you're worried about spice, just add a little bit. You don't have to do the full tablespoon. But I would recommend at least a half a tablespoon, just because it has a really unique flavor and it's an important flavor. But if you're really worried about spice, you can leave it out. But I like to up the spice ante. So I'm going to do the full 2 tablespoons into mine. I've got the Cajun seasoning in there already. I got the sausage in there. I got the veggies. There's a couple more veggies sitting out though, so I'm gonna add those. I've got my Tabasco in there, 2 tablespoons of Tabasco. You can do less than that if you'd like. Then I'm gonna go in with my tomatoes as well. So the tomatoes are gonna be added to the broth and the soup. I'll stir that all in. So there goes your tomatoes. They add a lot of color and some nice chunks. And then I'll stir this in. And then we want to bring this to a simmer. So we're getting really close to being done. It's looking pretty good. Here's something's in here that I'm going to get out. I don't know what that is. Oh, it looks like a caramelized piece of onion. Okay, sorry, got distracted. Next, the bay leaves can go in. I'm going to add 3 bay leaves. You can add 1, 2, 3, however many you'd like. But the bay leaves you don't eat. You put them in there for them to cook in there, but then you can take them out when they're done. And so don't chop them up or anything. You just add them whole like this, dried, and they add a nice flavor. And then you can take them out. We always say whoever gets the bay leaf is going to have good luck the next day. But since there's 3 in here, you can have 3 people with good luck if you eat the whole pot. So then, yeah, here, I'm going to stir this around gently. I'm going to scrape the bottom a bit, just like we were doing with our roux, although it's not so intense as before. You still want to scrape the bottom a little bit, like your Zamboni, getting all the corners of your pot and the big flat middle part. And so then we've got our tomatoes in there. Now it's time to add our garlic and our okra. So I'm going in with the garlic. Again, I like the garlic to just have a nice cooked flavor. Some people would definitely caramelize their garlic. Again, you're the chef. If you want a little more caramelized garlic flavor, you can do that. I like to add it later. I like that fresh flavor. And then there goes the okra. The okra is going to cook. It's going to thicken the soup now. If we add it too soon, it kind of does a little bit too much. It cooks a little too much, and then I think it's better to add it later. Just adds its thickening process kind of towards the end here. And yeah, we're going to bring this up to a simmer and let it simmer for like 15 minutes. So I think we've got almost everything we need in there. The only thing that's hanging out is the shrimp. And so what I want you guys to do is get your broth all the way to a simmer. So it's boiling. But really a light simmer. See how mine is just starting to bubble in places, but it's not really going super fast yet. Once you see a little more action in there, a little more bubble action, excuse me, that's when you can add your shrimp. And I really don't like overcooked shrimp. I like it to be just barely cooked. So you can add them and then watch them and let them cook for 10 or 15 minutes. But at 10 minutes, check them and see how they're looking. And then if they're done, then the gumbo's done. If they're not done, just go a couple more minutes and then they'll be done really soon. They cook fast. So I'm going to go ahead and add my shrimp. Once this starts to boil, then I'm going to add my shrimp and then I'll let you guys go. I think you'll be done after that. Now, one thing to remember, we should always taste it. So I'm going to do a little taste test now before we add the shrimp while we wait for it to get hot. And I'm going to get a little bit of pepper, and I'm mainly just tasting the broth, the thick part of the soup. And I got a little bell pepper in there, but a little onion. So I'm just going to taste that and see where we are. Delicious. I would say the Tabasco tastes a little raw right now. It's going to cook more in there. So I'm excited for it to heat up and boil a little bit more. I do think it could use, I'm going to just do a pinch of salt for mine. I don't think, if you guys used a regular chicken broth or bouillon, you probably don't need salt. Mine had this crayfish broth, and so I'm going to add a little salt because I think it needs it, but yours probably doesn't if you had a broth from the store or something like that. But other than that, I think it's tasting pretty good. I just want to get it up to a simmer and then add my shrimp. So I feel like you guys, if you have any questions, send them my way, but maybe I won't make you wait. You can just sign off and, finish up your gumbo on your own. I'll show you these crayfish again. I think they're so cool. They're literally tiny little lobsters. And their tails kind of snap shut. When they're cooked, these are cooked, their tail should snap shut like that. That's a good sign that these are cooked already. So I'm going to add these to the gumbo with the shrimp. Look at the size of the claw on that one. Just a funny creature. You can see why they call them mud bugs. They look like insects with all the legs. But if you've ever had a lobster or a crab, they're very closely related and kind of a cool ingredient that came out of the waters around here. So, anyways.
Wait, do we have any questions? Silas, do you have a question?
So when do we put in the shrimp?
Yeah, good question. So I'm gonna wait until mine is bubbling, and mine is, see, it's just starting to bubble, like in a few spots. And I'm gonna stir it a little bit more. But once it starts to bubble, you can add the shrimp and then set a timer for 10 minutes, and then pull one out and cut it. And you can look and see if it still looks clear on the inside. Like shrimp are kind of clear looking; they're almost translucent. But once they're cooked, they turn white and they get kind of firm. So I'd say 10 minutes in a bubbling pot. And if they're not, and then pull one out and cut it open. If it looks clear on the inside, then you got to cook it for another 5 minutes or so. But if it's fully white, if it turns fully white and it looks good all the way through, you're ready to eat.
Sweet. And a reminder, you guys can eat it with rice, or you can eat it alone, or
Yeah. If you want to make some rice, that's good. I like bread. Toasted bread is good. The traditional way is a dollop of rice in the bowl with a little sprinkled green onions, and then you can take little bits from the the rice every bite. But whatever you want. I usually eat it with bread, and yeah. So here goes. I'm gonna put my shrimp in. Here we go. And yeah, if you have any other questions, please let me know. Remember to taste it. Adjust the seasoning as you think you should, and then enjoy.